Bataan featured prominently during World War II. Prior to the 1941 Japanese invasion, the U.S. Army stored nearly 1 million US gallons of gasoline here. Shortly after the Japanese Army invaded the country in December 1941, the combined U.S. and Filipino forces were being gradually overrun and General Douglas MacArthur moved his troops to the Bataan Peninsula in an attempt to hold out until a relief force could be sent from the U.S. Japanese forces started a siege of the peninsula on January 7, 1942 and launched an all-out assault on April 3. A few months after the Battle of the Points, the majority of the American and Filipino forces surrendered on April 9 and were forced to march more than 100 kilometers from Bataan to Tarlac, which became known as the Bataan Death March.
Bataan Death March begins the day after the surrender of the main Philippine island of Luzon to the Japanese. The 75,000 Filipino and American troops captured on the Bataan Peninsula began a forced march to a prison camp near Cabanatuan. During this infamous trek, known as the Bataan Death March, the prisoners were forced to march 85 miles in 6 days, with only one meal of rice during the entire journey. By the end of the march, which was punctuated with atrocities committed by the Japanese guards, hundreds of Americans and many more Filipinos had died. The day after Japan bombed the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, the Japanese invasion of the Philippines began. Within a month, the Japanese had captured Manila, the capital of the Philippines, and the U.S. and Filipino defenders of Luzon were forced to retreat to the Bataan Peninsula. For the next 3 months, the combined U.S.-Filipino Army, under the command of U.S. General Jonathan Wainwright, held out impressively despite a lack of naval and air support. Finally, on April 7, with his army crippled by starvation and disease, Wainwright began withdrawing as many troops as possible to the island fortress of Corregidor in Manila Bay. However, 2 days later, 75,000 Allied troops were trapped by the Japanese and forced to surrender. The next day, the Bataan Death March began. Of those who survived to reach the Japanese prison camp near Cabanatuan, few lived to celebrate U.S. General Douglas MacArthur's liberation of Luzon in 1945. In the Philippines, homage is paid to the victims of the Bataan Death March every April on Bataan Day, a national holiday that sees large groups of Filipinos solemnly walking parts of the death route.